Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, depending on your time zone. And thank you for joining us. We'll begin in just a few minutes. I ask for your patience before we get started. Thank you. Okay, once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll begin our study session. As always, everything that we feel we experience during this study, let us in the name of Messiah, which is one with Meishu Sama, return that to God, along with all those who are connected to us, so that we may be born anew as true children of God, Messiahs. I'd like to begin the study session with sacred oath and words of prayer. Sacred oath. With great fear of God, we acknowledge that the Lord God is our true Father, the one and only God. We revere Meishu Sama as the model for all humanity and as our own example to follow. Meishu Sama, who was born anew as a true child of God, the Messiah, by receiving the divine will that God accomplished in heaven. We believe that Jesus Christ, who 2,000 years ago embodied the name of Messiah, the name most holy and high, is serving the Lord God in unity with Meishu Sama. And we regard the messages of Kyoshu Sama, who reveals to us the will of Meishu Sama in this material world, as the sole, absolute, and irreplaceable foundation in advancing our mission here on earth. Words of prayer. God, I acknowledge that you are alive Within me, you are alive. I thank you for nurturing me to be newly born as your child. May this blessing be shared with all. In the name of Messiah, which is one with Meshu-sama, I surrender myself to you. Please use me as you wish. Thank you. I'd like to begin our study session also with a hymn by Kyoshu-sama, a very, very deep hymn. We have come to know the one and only God and the truth of Messiah. Oh, how immense is this blessing. Kyoshu-sama. So Kyoshu-sama, as we know, has been offering these hymns, and on a monthly basis, they're getting printed for us to also study from them. And the hymns are a really important, essential part of our studies, because all of the thoughts, all of the teachings that we are studying are actually condensed into these hymns. So the same is in Meishu-sama's time. The original pioneer ministers and members, they didn't have a collection of teachings like we do nowadays to study from. It was all from the hymns that Meishu-sama would offer. And from, of course, Meishu-sama's live studies that he would do, meetings that he would do, and they would write those teachings down. But until the easiest way for them to capture those teachings were through the hymns. So I'd like to keep this hymn in mind as we look at the review from last week and our study that we'll be doing this week. Okay? We have come to know the one and only God and the truth of Messiah. Oh, how immense is this blessing. Last week, I hope everybody can hear me okay. Last week, we did a review and we looked into the greeting by Masaaki-sama that was done on February 5th with the leaders, the head ministers of Japan and some overseas ministers. I'd like to do a small recap on that. I hope each of you had opportunity to go back and read the message in its entirety. I'd just like to stress a few points that we looked at last week in connection with what we are studying this week. So in this greeting, we studied about the meaning of being saved and revived. So as Masaki-sama pointed out, many of us hear the words, we are saved, our ancestors are saved, they have been revived. So is there a purpose for us to pray to them, or pray to God, or pray before the ancestor shrine that we have, the Mitamaya? And in this lecture, Masaki-sama said something very interesting and very deep. Whether our ancestors are saved or not, whether they are forgiven or not, he said, I believe all comes down to whether we ourselves, who are the sum total of our ancestors and who are one body with our ancestors, are forgiven, saved, and revived or not. So do we consciously acknowledge that we are already in the age of day and look to serve in that way? Or are we still believing that we are in the age of night? And in that same message, he said we are already in the age of day, and quoted one of Meishu-sama's hymns. And in that hymn, Meishu-sama says, miserable are you, the lost sheep. Why do you not realize? Look, the long-standing age of night has already passed. And Masaki-sama explains the time of the suffering of this earthly world has already ended. We believed for a long time, and still believe, that this earthly world was and is a world of suffering. We live in a world of suffering, that is the age of night. That's how we used to see the world. That's how we believed. However, Meishu-sama says, and he continued in the message saying, Meishu-sama says that the sun is already out. He says that the world of forgiveness, a world filled with light, has already arrived. And next, does each and every one of us open the door or not to our hearts? Do we recognize that we are existences that have been forgiven or not? That is all that there is, he says. Do we recognize that the truth is that the light and forgiveness, the light that forgives sin is out? Meishi-sama had said this, and now Kyosho-sama is reminding us and saying this to us, right? So he says, in no way does that mean that we are not to pray, right? On the contrary. And he explains the fact that we don't recognize that we are in this age of day, and that when we hear that we've been forgiven and saved and we take it so lightly, is because we are not aware of the intensity, the amount, or how grave our sin really was, that we are sinful beings, that we sinned, right? And it says, for that reason, for us to be able to recognize that God in our daily lives, through all kinds of human relationships, we distress, we suffer, we are conflicted, we think that a person is detestable, we are jealous, we have angry feelings. We are made to feel various feelings. Or through the news, we are shown the various conditions of humanity. And God is saying to us through each one of those occurrences, you may not know the depths of your own sins, and your eyes may not fill with tears when you are told that you are not guilty. But this is how you were. I forgave you and your ancestors for how you were. So, in this age of day that we are living now, we are experiencing all that we are experiencing through our feelings, through our consciousness, so that we can recognize what God has already forgiven in us. So when we say that we are forgiven and we are free of sin, it's not for us to take it lightly and say, oh, okay, now we're free of sin, we're living in paradise. It doesn't work like that. It's for us to really recognize what God forgave, and for us to repent, returning to God, to serve God in this new way of living, in this new era, in the second phase of creation. So in this message, Masaki-sama says very clearly, it's one line, but it's very, very powerful. So it's not about whether others are good or bad, right? It is through knowing this that truly, if you can think, even if just a little, so this state of my being a sinner has been forgiven, then I think we may be able to feel a small part of what Meishu-sama spoke of. Knowing he knelt when he felt that he was saved and his eyes filled with tears whenever he knelt before God. So we're in paradise, right? And our sins have been forgiven. And then naturally, as a human condition, we turn our eyes outward because we're experts at looking out at the world. And we say, but such and such a person is doing this wicked deed, or such and such a person got away with that, or this person hasn't realized that we are in paradise. And Masaki-sama says in this one line, it's just a few words, it is not about whether others are good or bad. We're in a completely new phase of God's creation, serving God in a completely new way. And that new way of serving, is for us first to also learn to stop looking outward and start turning our eyes toward God, inward. It's about our relationship with God, how we deal, how we recognize our surroundings as being part of what God forgave in us. So, little by little, through that practice, our awareness of how grave our sin was and how limitless and infinite is God's love to receive all of us in his heaven through the word Messiah. To really notice that, as we begin to notice that feeling that Meshusama felt as his eyes filled with tears when he knelt before God, recognizing his life being saved, will start little by little to be nurtured in our hearts as well. So in no way does it mean that now we don't need to pray before God and we don't need to pray before the Mitamaya, but the thought and the attitude of how we are praying before God shifted, it changed. So as we stand in front of the altar, we recognize that God is alive within us and that all our ancestors are alive within us. And through what we experience during the day, we need to, through the name of Messiah, return to God, acknowledging that forgiveness of God and surrendering ourselves back to God. So Masaksama wrote, for us, it's hard to think about these things all of the time. So God created the Mitamaya for us to be able to remember that. And it says, so when we face the Mitamaya, I believe we can think, ancestors, together let us receive the forgiveness embedded in the name of Messiah. In this way, I believe having a Mitamaya in a concrete form is really important, especially now that we have a Mitamaya with a renewed design. Some people ask me a question about that. For all those who are not aware, there is a new design for the Mitamaya, but the essence, the idea, and the concept of the Mitamaya hasn't changed. We need to return to God when we stand in front of the Mitamaya. And if we do not have a Mitamaya at home, it is rather difficult to remember our ancestors, to receive forgiveness together, and to create an opportunity to interact with them. So the Mitamaya serves as that purpose, as we study in that message, to create an opportunity for us during the day to take a pause and remember that our ancestors are alive and we're returning with them at that moment. So that was a quick review of kind of what we looked at last week. It was actually a lot deeper than that, but it was just as a quick summary. Like I said, this was the greeting by Masaki-sama on February 5th, 2020. So I highly recommend that each one go back and restudy it, reread it, and we can each go deeper into what we are noticing and learning at this very moment in time. During the week, I received actually a lot of questions, and if I were to do all the questions tonight, we'd be here for several hours. So I'll split them up over the time period of the next few weeks into parts of the study session. But one of the questions that I received and I would like to look at is, what does it mean to serve God? Sorry, one moment. So we are all aware now that to serve God is to return to heaven with all humanity, all of creation, and be born anew as children of God, right? It's a very overall, very general way of looking at this question. But I'd like to go a little bit deeper, and I'd like to go a little bit deeper using Kyoshu-sama's hymns that he has been revealing to us for us to look into this question, right? What does it mean to serve God? And I like to ask, when we think about that, how deeply have we thought about what does it mean to serve God? Like I said, from a human point of view, it's very easy for us to look into a situation, to look into a problem, to look into a question. And because we have such a limited sight, limited vision, we take that concept and we try to mold it into something that fits or is convenient to us. But what does it mean to serve God from God's point of view, right? Is another way that we can ask that question. And I like to look a little bit into that. Kirsama shared several hymns this past couple months, and I put a few of them here today that we can look at. The first one I'd like to look at is this one that says, O Lord God, through making all creation evolve, you created our heart, our consciousness. So, through the evolution of creation, our hearts and our consciousness evolved. So, for our consciousness and our heart to exist, it is extremely dependent on the evolution of creation. Right? They're set. They're not separate. So, like I said, from a human point of view, it's very easy for us to look at I'm here and God's creation's part of me. It's everywhere, but it's separate. But here in this poem, the way I see it today, it's inseparable, right? The evolution of creation brought our heart and consciousness into being. Then, Kiyosama has, in the next hymn, he says, O all creation, we are one body with you. At the beginning of the creation and even now. When we talk about God being alive, right? And God is alive in everything. It's, for me anyways, it's really hard to grasp that God is alive in every single thing that exists. That's everything that is visible and invisible, right? Everything that has, exists, breathes, as Meshama teaches us. And in this poem, all of creation, we are one body with all creation. At the beginning of creation and even now. So we were never separated from that creation. We're one body with that. Then Kiyosama has this poem. O all creation, you wish only one thing, to be useful for the divine will of bearing children of God. So all of creation, which we are part of, we are one body with, and which resulted in the evolution of creation, it resulted in our consciousness being formed. All of that is serving the one purpose of God, to bear his own children. All of creation serving God to bear his children. So that's why I was saying earlier, when we say to serve God, it's very easy for us to limit ourselves and try to put that in a very human perspective where, okay, I need to do something to serve God. But for me, as part of all of creation, what does that serve? How are we serving God? Where is God leading us to? And here it's very clear, right? All of us, with all of creation, everything that exists in the visible and invisible world, in the world of origin, when God created everything, that will of God to bear his children was infused, imbued into everything that exists. So everything is moving in that direction to serve God for that purpose. And it might seem obvious. Oh, okay, so that makes sense. Everything is moving there. But check out the next couple of poems, hymns that are in here. We came into the world having received the will of God in heaven, in our origin. And we received it together with you, O all of creation. So that's re-emphasizing. We received that will of God in the world of origin, in that heaven. And we received it together with all of creation. Our purpose, our whole goal in life is to serve God in this process of bearing his own children. Our purpose was not to come into this world and become rich. It's not to come and become famous or just to live this earthly life, which unfortunately we forgot about that original purpose and came into this world and started living our lives the way we wanted. And here someone goes and expresses again, right? All of creation, you wish only one thing, to be useful for the divine will of bearing children of God. And at first, when I read this, I said, wow, there's a lot of hymns where Kyosho-sama is talking about all of creation, right? What's Kyosho-sama trying to show us? How maybe limited our minds are into our own self right now. And we have to start seeing the big picture, right? From God's point of view. How and what are we here to do? How to serve God? How to really please God? And if all of creation is going in that direction to bear children of God, how do I do that? Is the question that we have to start really focusing on, right? What's my purpose to do that? Then this one really got to me. We must bear in mind money, indispensable for buying and selling, strives to serve God in place of all creation. So it brings that question sometimes. What do you mean? Money strives to serve God. That's like a very living characteristic, right? I strive to do something as a person. How is money striving to serve God in place of all of creation? But all of creation, money was also created by God, and God's will is also in money, and God's life, God's living and breathing also through money. So when we really start to reflect about all of creation, one moment, Choto Makiko, can you get the charger? Can you get the charger? The phone is good. The computer is gonna die. Sorry, I forgot to charge the computer. It's in the kitchen. Sorry, guys. I forgot to charge the computer. It's gonna disconnect. So money, which seems like something that's not living, right? It's just an object used to serve a purpose for me to buy something or sell something. In reality, it's very alive and is serving God. Sorry. Got you? Oh, one moment. Sorry, guys. It happens. Okay? Yo. Actually, for the next screen. So going back now, money is it's not just an object. It's not just something that I worked for. I make my hours, I receive that cash, and I can buy the things I need and survive, right? I used to have a very limited comprehension of money in itself because I'm thinking, okay, money's there to serve me so I can serve God, right? Money's there so I can pay my bills and to serve God. But money in itself is striving to serve God in all of creation. If God is alive in everything, in every cell of our body, and as Mishama says, everything in the universe breathes. So the breath of life of God is also flowing through money. And then it makes us think, how am I using God's money? How am I using everything? And the easiest way to see that we took everything as our own and we took a possession of it as if it was ours, I think is through money, right? We've been learning through Meisama's teachings, of course, Kyosama's messages, that we as humanity, humans, we took this consciousness, this life of God, and we took possession of that, right? And we used it as we well intended, and we created a mess, basically. And God forgave us for that. Through the redemption of Jesus, God forgave that and allowed us now to return, as we repent, to return back to heaven, to be born anew as children of God. Because God needed to fulfill his will that was already in the beginning of all of creation for us to be born anew as children of God. But the easiest way to see that we do that, we didn't just do it, we still do, I think is through money. If God is alive in everything, and even in the money that we receive, we tend to forget that God is alive in that money, or not even recognize that. And we say, this is my money. I worked very hard for it. I'm going to live my life the way I want to live. Right? And all those feelings are very self-centered feelings. All those intentions that we have, they are materialized and expressed through money. So how we use it, how we don't use it, or how we misuse it, all of that, our self comes out through the use in money. And we can see how we manipulate it and how we use it and how we make one another suffer because of it. So I think that money is one of the greatest mirrors to show ourselves how we can be, right? When we're wealthy, we use money in excess and extravagantly. And then when we are in a poorer state, we end up fighting in conflict for it. Or because we want to accumulate more of it, we're willing to hurt one another to possess more of it. So the true self, the essence of ourselves, is so easily expressed as that part of our egocentric self easily comes out through money. But money is striving in place of all creation to also fulfill that will, to also show us what God already forgave. I think I can see this poem in that way also, this hymn in that way. Through that, through our interaction with money, we can look and see what God has already forgiven. And we can return to heaven with all of our ancestors who have that affinity, who have that connection. That's, I believe, one way for us to look at it and to deal with it. Another way is also our thoughts and our zoning as to when we go to use money now. If we recognize that money is alive, that God is alive in it, that God's will is in it, right? This essence of Messiah that permeates all of creation and is in all of creation is also in money. So when we use money, there's a whole other way that we can use money now, right? To serve God and to please God in this work of creation of God. And I think that one of the best ways to do it, and it's very hard. I've mentioned this in other study sessions, but it's interesting how easily we forget to do that. Is, for example, when we make a payment, right? Let's say I have to pay my rent. We don't take into account how many people that payment will reach. And we don't take into account how many people that money passed before it got to me for me to make that payment. So I think that to use that money in a more God-centered way, right, is for me to recognize God first and foremost before using that money. So I recognize that this money is going to go through many hands, right? I recognize that this payment is going to go through many people. Then I recognize that I am here to serve God in that process. So I can pray. May all those who come in contact with this money, may all those who have come in contact with this money, all that feeling, all that thought that is imbued or attached to that money, may all those who are connected to those thoughts, in the name of Messiah, which is one with Meshama, may they return to heaven, to God, with us, to be born anew as children of God, Messiahs. I guarantee you that that is going to be a completely different way of serving God with money, right? Money is striving to do that, but we can do our part consciously, recognizing God isn't alive in that process. And God is receiving all of humanity. And I think one of the easiest tools to do that is through money because we are so dependent on it. But instead of being enslaved by that money or working so hard just to accumulate that money, why not we start serving God through that money? When we talk about donation, Reverend Shibui, many, many years ago, was asked, how should we donate? And basically, Reverend Shibui said, well, you keep only what you need, but you donate everything to God. So the idea is donate everything to God as much as you can and keep only the necessary means, right? To pay what you need to pay. So his feeling and his desire was always to serve God the most, right? So it's first God. So he would take everything he had and some and donate it back to God. And he would keep only the essential to pay what he needed to pay. And of course, we have many commitments during the month, right? We have our rents to pay, we have electricity, we have phone, we have, some people have medical expenses, tuitions, and cars and insurance and many other things that we need to fulfill our duty. So it's illogical for me to say, okay, well, your money, you do your donation, 90% of what's your income, you keep 10% and live your daily life. That also is very hard. But why not do a donation 100% of your money? And what I mean by that is every cent we spend, we serve God through that money. So when I'm paying my bills, I'm recognizing that I'm being allowed to pay those bills, to serve God, to surrender all those who are coming in contact with that money, to return to God, to be born anew as children of God, as Messiahs. I think that that zoning and that way of serving is much more constructive than our attachment towards the money. So Misama has a teaching where he says the more attached we are to money, the more hardships we experience, right? So if money is received in an ill way, right, we have unexpected expenses that come up and things start happening to clean that out because that's not usable, right? But that attachment is not just um, in that ill-gotten form. It's in our minimum, slightest thoughts. For example, we live in a world right now, in a credit card world, where the world functions on debt, right? And even though we use our credit cards daily, many of us have a lot of difficulty paying the bill at the end of the month. And then when we have to pay, many of us even complain, oh, I have to pay the bill. Or I've heard cases where I'm only going to pay the minimum. And then we'll see what happens with the interest, but think of it as a payment for the rest of our life, but we don't want to pay, right? Or even with our taxes. Tax evasion is a huge problem in the United States. So all that attachment towards money cannot be used in a constructive way because we're so attached to that, right? So I think God is showing us through that situation our innermost feelings that have been forgiven. That attachment in itself that we have towards money, those feelings that we have towards possession, of keeping these material things, right? So as we observe that, and as we observe it in our daily lives, as we are doing the payments that we are, and as we are utilizing this money that God is allowing us to use to fulfill his mission of all humanity being born anew as children of God, if we change our soning and start serving God through that, I believe that for the first time, that money will be returning to God, along with all those who are connected to that, millions of souls who are connected to that. Money is the fastest way to circulate feelings, right? So all those connected to that through the name of Messiah, every time we make a payment, every time we pay off some bill, or every time we purchase something, we connect that transaction to all the people, all the souls that are connected to that. And through the name of Messiah, we can return to heaven and be born anew as God's children. So it's a really interesting topic because it's easy for us to say, yes, God's alive in everything. I can see God in nature. I see God in the stars. I see God in the universe. But God is alive in money. I can see God alive in money. And God, who created money to strive to bring us to be born anew as God's children, is a lot harder sometimes to perceive due to the fact that we live in such a material world. So, and the last hymn that I'd like to share today is this one. O God, you reside in all creation and manifest yourself as fire, water, and soil, as your sacred nature. So, as we are experiencing nature around us, let us recognize that God is residing in all things, not just in us, but in all things, and expressing himself through that. So God created all that. There was another question that said, okay, but if God is alive in us, does that mean that I am God and I'm actually serving myself when we serve God? It's a little bit different, I think. Yes, we're a part of God, and God is alive in us. But we're not God. We are created by the Creator. God is outside of that. God created creation. So we are a part of that, and we're part of the body of God. But it's like saying, okay, is that 1 millionth of a cell that's alive in my body, is that me? It's as if everything that God created was, let's just as an example, right? The cells of our body, the whole creation is the body, and every cell makes a part of that. We are one cell, one part of that, but we are not the whole, but we are part of the whole. So I think it's much bigger than that, right? We are not God, but God is alive within us. And our consciousness, which is the ultimate creation of God, which is something that we took from God and we used as we well intended, that's our way to communicate with God and to serve God in this new phase. So God, through our consciousness, through our awareness, is receiving everything that he created back into his heaven to give everything a whole new birth. So we're a little bit more than just that one cell, but in the grand scheme of things, we're nothing but a grain of sand in the seashore, as Mishama says, right? But very important aspect, because consciously, through our feelings, through our thoughts, we are serving, along with all of creation, along with all things, to be born anew as children of God, Messiahs. So I hope that kind of was able to address the question as I see it today, and as I understand it through the studies that we are doing. What does it mean to serve God? And I hope that through the insight of a little bit of how we can serve God, not only just by surrendering, but when we use everything that's being given to us, like money, and especially money, how we can consciously serve God in our daily life, right? Through every human interaction that we have, through that connection that we have with that money. That's also serving God, for us to all be born anew as children of God, as Messiahs. So I hope that addressed those questions, that specific question. Like I said, it gets pretty long. That's why I didn't go into the other questions that we have. We'll split it up into a few study sessions to go deeper in and a little bit more profound in that area. If anybody would like to ask any questions right now, please feel free to do so. Last week we had a problem with the Facebook questions, just to let you guys know. People were asking questions, but for some reason they didn't appear in the chat until afterwards. So I apologize about that. And if that happens again today, I will go back later on after the study session and address those questions, or maybe in the next study session we can address into that. But just to let you know, that's what happened last week. And sorry, my apologies for that. YouTube 大丈夫? So I was asked which guidance from Kyosh Sama I'm reading. Today I actually did Kyosh Sama's hymns. Okay, just so you know, these are available online. We are posting them individually. We have the files also available in our website, and I can send that to you later on. But these were the Kiyosama's hymns. So, like I said in the beginning of the study session, Kiyosama's guidances, they're really deep and really profound. But many times we can see um, a lot of the essence of those guidances in the hymns. So Kiyosama puts a lot of love and care as he uh, makes these hymns so that the essence of those guidances are there. So today was actually a collection from March and April, if I'm not mistaken, that I used. So it should be available online. If not, it will be available in the next few weeks as they're being posted on a weekly basis for everybody. And then the other study that we did was last week. The other part that we were reading was from Greeting from Asakusama, done on February 5th of this year. So that's also available online. And I think we're having a buffering issue in YouTube. So, but anyways, so that was the two materials used this week for us to study into. It's buffering on both. Did it stop the video? The video is buffering? It's looping? No? Oh, so it should be okay. So anyways, we reached about 1 hour into our study session. If you have any other questions later on you'd like to ask or see the material, please feel free to join us. We're also having daily morning prayers where Reverend Felipe is also looking into a lot of these lectures, greetings, guidances, and hymns. So it's a good opportunity to also catch those starting at 10 a.m. on a daily basis for us to go deeper and study Kiyosama's messages. I'd like to thank you for joining us, and I wish you all a great week. Tomorrow we'll be doing our study session, the study session in Portuguese, again at 6:30. Welcome to join us, and have a great evening. Thank you.